Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to have an interview that I just did with Santiago, who is an investor in Illuvium, but also a council member for Illuvium, who puts in a lot of work. This guy is really, really intelligent. And I wanted for a while to have a conversation with someone about some of the downfalls of crypto gaming and some of the potential issues that Illuvium might face moving forward. And he just seemed like someone who's been in the space, has so much knowledge. And I really wanted to pick his brain, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys do too. So let's get into it. Welcome, Santiago. Thanks for coming onto the show, man.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here.
Before we get into anything else, I just wanted to say that, like, for me, like, I'm still fairly new into the crypto space, about 6 months in, still learning everything. You do a podcast over on Blockworks. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's a really good podcast where you guys just talk about just everything crypto, general wrap-ups at the end of the weeks and stuff like that. So definitely go over there, especially if you're coming into this from a gaming side and you're curious to get more info on that. I think you guys do a fantastic job on that one. So we'll get into it because we are a little bit time gated. So I just wanted to kick off with why Alluvium? You obviously invested in Illuvium. You seem heavily involved. I don't know if it's the most involved you are into any project, but from behind the scenes, talking to other council members and stuff like that, you seem to do a lot of work. So what attracted you to Illuvium as an investor in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the time, I was at Parify investing heavily into DeFi, and I looked at Axie, and I think I played the game. I didn't, it wasn't like the most immersive game. I grew up gaming. The games that I love are Zelda, World of Warcraft, like more immersive games. And Axie to me was interesting, and I did not end up investing the seed round, much to my detriment, for a variety of reasons. But one of the things as an investor is you always keep tabs of projects, no matter what, right? Even if you're not investing. And it was very hard to overlook the fact that it was getting a lot of traction. This play to earn movement, and I said, well, if a game like that can do what it's doing, which is super impressive, it really is just proving out the category. And then I was like, okay, I really want to go out and find games that I would play, that are perhaps more sustainable, where a lot of games, attract spenders, not just earners, right? And for that, I think you need a very immersive game. And prior to that, I was very close to Kane, who's the founder of Synthetics. He came to me and said, I have a brother and he wants to finally come and build. And I said, wait a minute, you have a brother. Point number one, take my money. Point number two is, and he showed me the entire idea, kind of the lore and the vision. It was very early. I think it was perhaps the first call. And knowing Kane and how he operates, and then talking to Kieran, it was very clear to me that Kieran had a lot of the same DNA and of a builder, and the right team that had a lot of experience in Web2 and like in designing like Lord of the Rings, like lore and so to me that was the right combination. And I always look for founders that have the ability to hire a team, and I said they're probably going to build up what is, in my estimation, the most immersive Web3 game. And that was my thesis at the time. I've been super impressed. I mean, that was December of last year. So 2 years ago, I guess.
Yeah, about a year
ago, year and a bit. For all intents and purposes, 13, 14 months ago. And, since then, the team has grown drastically. The game has evolved so much. And I think that's just a testament of the ability to hire really, really talented people. So that was my thesis for Illuvium.
Yeah. So I got a brother. I'm in. That was as much as it took. And not only one, it's the three of them. And I know you're talking about the lore, and I know Aaron had a big input into the beginning of that lore, and he's just incredibly deep and smart, and like just so methodical about the way he goes about it. So like that is like that balance that brings to Kieran as well. And then obviously we've got Grant in there as well, who's just crazy. But and then obviously the council became a thing with the governance and stuff like that. And so what made you, did you originally, because you were already on the council when I came into the space, did you apply? Was that something you wanted to do, or something that someone else put you up to and then you sort of took it away?
I think that the first epoch, the first council, the community wasn't really formed yet. It was still very much in inception. And at that point, I mean, there was still a nomination process, but Kieran sent to me and said, I thought you ought to be in the council. I said, I agree. Like, to the extent that I could be helpful. And that was the first time that I was in the council, and I really enjoyed it. I think that there were some important decisions that had to be made around the sale and a number of other parameters. In future epochs, I've really enjoyed the community approach to nominations. And in many of these times, I've been nominated. But as you alluded to earlier, Illuvium is the project that I spend the most amount of time on, and for a number of reasons. But primarily because I see it as, for me, over the last 10 years that I've been involved in crypto, is how do I push the space forward? And I think part of that is doing a podcast and talking about crypto in a very objective way, not just, yeah, this is technology, super exciting, but it's not perfect. And so we just need to be very balanced and objective, which I hope to do here, of the potential of this technology. But it's not perfect, right? And the second one is, over the last 10 years, I've sort of struggled to understand and explain to people why crypto, right?
Yeah.
Bitcoin is interesting, but unless you're in Venezuela, unless you're in a country where you're in Australia, right? And unless you actually feel pain and risk, it's difficult to make the argument, right? For most people, right? Except us punks. But NFTs and gaming make crypto very, very relatable. And to me, that's why I decided to spend a lot of my time in this particular sector within crypto. And I think Alluvium has a really good shot at onboarding the next million billion users. And so
100%, yeah.
in the council, really the objective, and we can talk about the council and the composition. I've served in multiple epochs now. I see a really kind of early innings, but really good components of a very strong community. A lot of decisions have been made by the council. And I think now, in the proposals that I've been a part of, I always want to make sure that the role of the council, especially now, is to support the team, because they want to do a lot. And it's a very fast moving space. It's still a startup. It's still very young. And so we need to just make sure that we're empowering the team and be a resource in their decision making, whilst also listening to the community. But I think more so is the former, not the latter, which is, we want to make sure that, if I were to kind of, my singular objective as a council member is, how do we make sure that we are the most immersive game and one that launches first? Because I think we're in contention for both. And if we do those two things right, then it's off to the races, right? Because I do think that, look, there's no first mover advantage here. Obviously, Axie is live, and DeFi Kingdoms and a few others. But I think from a truly kind of immersive game, I think Illuvium will be the first.
The first, deep game that has the gameplay, not just the finances behind it. Like, I look at some things like that the horse racing one, the Peg Axie that's getting around at the moment, and it's literally just click a button and watch a horse race. Like, it's just straight gambling, and I'm like, that's not gaming, and that's just, to me, that's just something that'll build up and
gamified
topple
finance.
down. Yeah, so
that's gamified.
And you said how you talk about, like, it's not perfect yet and stuff like that. And this is just one man's opinion. I could be wrong on this, but with the whole decentralization, I'm seeing a lot of, like, it almost feels like, and not everywhere, but it seems to lead to a bit of entitlement in decentralization. And, like, how do you view where, like, Alluvium, say, is at with its DAO and the voting system and everything like that? Like, do you think there's still a lot of room for growth in those models?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. Like, I think as you said, the word entitlement is key here, because most people just come to this space and say, let's just decentralize everything. It's like, well, practically, what does that mean, right? Because you need to balance certain parts should not be decentralized, at least not initially, like product development.
Yeah, 100%.
Actually developing the game.
Yeah.
You try to decentralize that, it's chaotic, right? Nothing gets done. And so the things that actually need to be decentralized, I think the right things at this point, I think, have been the right decisions. The key decisions that have had to be made on the game, I think, have been a fairly decentralized process where the council gets involved, deliberates with the team, puts forth the proposal to the community, and then votes. Not only that, but I think that the short epoch of council members really kind of puts pressure on council members to serve their constituents, meaning the people, the community.
Yeah.
3 months is not it's not 6 years, right?
Yeah.
And I've always struggled out with politics. It's like, you elect the president or prime minister for years, and it's like, well,
what if they're shit next week? You're like, yeah.
Yeah. But there's pressure, right? And so, is it perfect? No. But then you look at other protocols, even something like Ethereum, right? It was just sort of this chaotic nature. But if you didn't have consensus as sort of like an anchor, then or the Ethereum Foundation, shit wouldn't get done. And so I think it's just important to like, hey, should everything be decentralized? Absolutely not. You lose a lot of efficiency in that process.
Yeah, 100%.
And decentralization is sort of a spectrum and a process. And so, it's important to just be mindful of that. I want to make sure that okay, w- the ability to own property, digital property, um, certain core principles and mechanisms of a game, as is any network like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Illuvium, should be sacrosanct, should be fully decentralized, like admin keys, like stuff like that. Absolutely. Other stuff, it's unclear to me why you want to decentralize it. Or what like the reason behind decentralization in contexts like, there's certain folks in the community say, wait a minute, I want to be part of every decision. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, okay, you own a token, fine. Like, you want to voice your opinion, fine. There's a process to do that.
Yeah.
But you can't just like barge in because there's just a process to do this. And it's not to be dismissive of community members. I think that's the most important thing ultimately of these networks. But sometimes it does feel like a little bit of a power struggle. Like, there's this dynamic in politics, which is very vocal minorities,
Yeah.
which are not necessarily representative of the whole. And so I always remind myself, when you go in Discord channels and when you hear folks, a lot of times, even Twitter, a lot of times it's just, people that are very vocal, but don't necessarily may have the best interests at heart. And
Yeah.
so,
And people that are
anything.
satisfied aren't always as vocal as those that are displeased. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, the odds of someone that is dissatisfied to put in a complaint is much higher than someone that is satisfied, right?
yeah.
And that's always the case for anything, right? And so we just got to keep that in the back of our minds. Again, the North Star always is, how do we move forward? How do we create a game that improves upon Web 2, that actually proves to the world, not only can we deliver, because the main criticisms of crypto have been historically, okay, fine, like, you benefit from this decentralization and immutability and yada, yada, yada. At the same time, um, it's actually like a shit product. Like
Yeah.
Ethereum, high gas fees. Some games, they're not as immersive as Call of Duty, or whatever other game you like. That's always has been the criticism of crypto applications. Consumer facing applications of crypto have always been, they're not as nice as Web 2. And I get it, it's fine. But Illuvium is not in that category, which is
Yeah.
why it's so exciting, right? Because it could
100%.
finally be like, what, there are some wallets you could argue that are really, really, in my estimation, look like Web 2, feel like Web 2, but also deliver the benefits of Web 3. Illuvium, I think, is even more powerful because it's going to be a game that, pound for pound, forget about all the Web3 elements and benefits, competes against credibly, a Web2 game.
Yep.
And that's what I want to see.
100%. And I like the sort of bits that you said about having something centralized, and that your main goal on the council is to let the team have a bit of freedom and do their thing. Because for me, coming into the crypto space as more of coming from a gaming scene, not knowing much about crypto, and you step into this whole decentralization type theme,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I don't care about, like, I honestly, personally don't care about holding my own assets. It's more the ability to be able to trade and sell them than just
Mm-hmm.
straight having, because, like, I mean, the amount of scams going on, you're worried about getting your wallet stolen, all that sort of stuff. A lot of people that we will eventually have to get, because a lot of people in the space at the moment are crypto native, and a lot of the people that you want to onboard don't really care as much about that stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
leads me into another one, which is something that I've been obviously trying to see what's happening in Alluvium and stuff like that. But as an investor, have you seen anyone doing some interesting onboarding type things to try and get fiat
Mm-hmm.
transactions, credit cards, all that sort of stuff into crypto games? Because I think that will be a big tilt to where you can download a game and just make transactions with credit card. That will make things a lot easier.
Yeah, I think so. Increasingly, like, wallets serve a really good purpose here. Like, something like Argent, it's pretty cool. I think, does social key management, abstracts away the complexity of you having to deal with your private keys. If you lose your keys, you have like 2 or 3 friends you can rely on, or you can use a hardware wallet. And so I think like that is something that, to your point, like, not everyone is ready, perhaps, to be their own bank, to hold their own keys, and to do proper key management. It's almost probably going to be the minority that does that. And so I think something like Argent is a good step in that direction. There's like Rainbow Wallet. There's another, actually, funny enough, Jordan from Synthetics is building a very kind of a very easy app to convert fiat and capture yield in DeFi. And I think that's really a gateway into Web3 generally, right?
Yeah.
Because interest is a killer use case. People want to capture more interest, especially in low interest rate environment. Okay, fine. You give people the ability to quickly on ramp from their bank to this app, capture yield, done. After that, it's like, okay, people wonder what else can I do here, right? And so, like, I think Australia as a country is produced some of the best and has a very thriving like crypto ecosystem and founders,
100%.
Synthetics, Wire, right?
Immutable X. Yeah.
Immutable X, I'm an investor into.
Yeah.
Robbie, like fantastic, right? Gods on Chain, I mean, same team, right?
Yeah.
Illuvium, of course, and there's so many, right? Maple Finance, God, the list really goes on and on
Guild
and
of
on and on.
Guardians tied into Immutable as
Guild of
well.
Guardians. I'm also
Yeah.
an investor in Guild of Guardians. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, and of course, a lot of people might give me shit because I'm forgetting names, but there's probably I've tweeted about this. There's like 10 or 20 like Australian projects. Nonetheless, yeah, I think like hey, is there a possibility for Illuvium to kind of just build this? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting, right? You could if you have a that the you always need a hook, right? As an application. So if you
Yeah.
produce a really really immersive game, people want to come to you, right? And so if you just build a really like friendly wallet or partner with something like Argent, then that's probably like the way you bring billions of people into the space.
Yeah. 100%. And you, like I said, I just see that as being like one of the biggest friction points, because when you
Mhm.
try and get people to do an extra step in anything to convert, that's just what adds to the friction. So I definitely think that'll be a key part moving forward.
Yeah.
But on the topic of the games, and do you like, from the games that you've been looking at from an investment point of view, when you look at their models, like how does Alluvium stand up to the rest? Because to me, Alluvium's model, where there's no pre-sale NFTs and everything's in the game once it happens with your set. It's like pretty much like buying packs of cards. Um, I think that's probably the best model that I've seen so far. I'm not saying it's perfect. I think eventually, 3D is down the road. Someone might come up with a genius one. But like at the moment, it's the cleanest I've seen compared to a lot of the other smaller games that I'm jumping into just testing, where it's like you have these pre-sale NFTs before the game launches, they get
Mhm.
jacked up in prices and people just want to play. So
Mhm.
they're paying these jacked prices. And then after 5 days to a week, there's no people coming in anymore. And then everything just collapses. So, like, have you seen
Yeah.
any other better models, or you just think Alluvium's sort of on point with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I found that there is always a lag, right? You have an idea, you start building the game, you raise some capital from investors. But I have seen other projects go direct to the community and sell NFTs or sell, primarily NFTs. And there are some benefits to that. I mean, I think like, look, it keeps people engaged. There is a fine balance, right? If your project's going to launch like in a year from now, well, it's difficult. But I think Illuvium in this case, they obviously there was obviously a seed round, which was angel investors. Then there was another round and Framework and Delphi and a bunch of other funds got involved that are very crypto kind of gaming focused and native. And then there was a public sale, and then there was this idea that if you participate in the public sale, you could also get NFTs. And there have been increasing, like there will be potentially a land sale coming up. Um, and so I think from a competitive standpoint, I think teams realize, how do you build a community? Because okay, if you don't engage the community, they're going to lose interest, right? It in this economy and just generally, it's an attention game. You're trying to capture attention, and so how do you do that? And I think NFTs have a lot of emotional cachet. People, I think, is pretty known now.
Yeah.
Collecting NFTs is really powerful. The idea of NFTs having utility in a game makes a lot of sense to me. So I think that like that model, I'm not as critical of. Of course, there are projects that just use that and don't deliver, and are producing games that are clearly not going to ever see the light of day, and or are
Really
really not
shit.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. But look, I mean, I think like it is an interesting way. Look, I've sort of look at like something like Bored Apes and say, wait a minute. I mean, are you kind of inverting the sequence of how to build a protocol, how to build a network, right?
Yeah.
Um, they started with a drop, and it quickly kind of gained ground, and look at where it is now, right? It
Oh,
has events all over the world, or like something like a friends with benefits, right?
yeah.
you start there, and what's stopping you from then layering on products, right? I mean, I think there is a version of this world where this is the way to kind of go about. You kind of invert, you build a community first, maybe with a simple thing like an NFT drop, and then you kind of layer on top of that products. Because
Yeah.
sometimes what I've seen a lot of startups fail is there's a very kind of founders, I think the good founders are kind of have this maniac obsession because they've had a problem in their back of mind. They want to build something. Kieran, Kane, I remember Kane telling me, look, it's taken me years to convince my brothers to like get interested in crypto, but finally they want to do something. And I think it was inspired by this idea that they saw something like Axie, that they saw NFTs, and they said the moment's right, given my background. And I find that pretty interesting. Like founders always have this kind of maniacal kind of obsession of fixing X or Y. But at the same time, the detriment of that is that you could be blindsided, which is you never kind of want to build and hope that people show up to use your thing.
Yeah.
Most of the time, this is why startups fail. There is a way and process where if you build a community, maybe something with a simple hook like an NFT drop, people are going to now have a vested interest and be vocal about what they want to see. And I think successful protocols, it's early, but and we have a few proof points, but Bored Apes, for all intents and purposes, I think has done a really good job of building utility and value and services to this community that feels it's pretty cool to be at the end
And
of the day, we're social. Yeah,
and,
you know
and
what I
then it
mean?
snowballs itself because it
Uh-huh.
starts and then the community takes over and then it just keeps rolling and becomes a bigger thing and a bigger thing and it keeps going on forward. But
Absolutely.
that you sort of you've led me into something else that I wanted to ask you about as an investor. You were talking about how you're talking about the mentality of founders and stuff like that. What is like the main thing you look at when investing in a project? Like is it more the founder or is it more the product or is it a mix of
Mhm.
both or where do you weigh it in that sense?
I think it's definitely both. I always, but again, if I were to loosen one constraint, is probably the product, because most of the times I get involved in super early stage, right? And so like Illuvium didn't have like a fully fleshed out product when I invested. It was really a, a bet on someone that I thought was never going to give up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know the background, but the Warwicks are a super competitive family,
Yeah.
and his dad was a professional tennis player. And not only that, but I think he has his other brothers have very clear and are quite talented in. I mean, I think one of his brothers was involved in like Lord of the Rings and
Yeah.
doing graphics for that. And I said, wow, like, yeah. I mean, so of course, like you need. I just don't invest in a founder if he's just really passionate. I mean, I think there's a lot of passionate people,
Yeah.
but you need to have an edge. You need to have like a unique insight. And I think in this case, that's what I look for. In the case of Illuvium, I saw some that have been pretty thoughtful in taking years to understand the space by virtue of osmosis of just having a brother like Kane, like it's hard not to.
Yeah.
And then obviously bringing together a team early on to me is really hard. If you are able to inspire other people to come and believe in your crazy version of this universe, then that's pretty cool, right? Because that's ultimately where most protocols that I'm an investor in struggle with. And probably the biggest struggle for all of them is hiring. They can't find talent.
Yeah.
But if you're able to look at how many people are, I think I forget the head count now. Every time I talk to Kieran, which is like every other day,
Yeah.
he's like, "Yeah, we just hired X and Y." And, it's like, and at one point, I think like it was just like, "Wait, you're how many?" I think it's over 50, and it was like,
Yeah.
okay,
And,
that's wild, right?
and as an outsider looking in, it doesn't look like they're making any bad hires. Like the shit's getting done pretty well and pretty efficiently. And
Yep.
it's crazy that they can actually scale that well. And I think that's definitely something that it comes to a personability like aspect of that person or whoever's recruiting to be able to actually communicate with people and get them on board, especially when you're trying to take people out of traditional into crypto where it's a
Mhm.
bit more, skeptical. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. They've done pretty well there. And is there any like massive red flags where if you see something when someone's like an investment prospect where you're just like, nah, I'm straight out straight away?
Like passing.
Yeah, like yeah, where you just like I like one thing where you just see it, and you're like, I can't invest in that
Mhm.
product.
Um, Not so much product. It's more intuition around the type of founder that I want to be
Yeah,
invested behind. That's really the make or break, really. Again, I think crypto is a pretty the evolution of crypto over the last 10 years is pretty interesting. Where it is your imagination spans really far when you say, okay, we can probably you can reinvent the web as we know it. We can reinvent so many different industries, and it's very tempting, right? Because uh, I don't think there's like a shortage of products that can be built. I think there's also a number of products that we haven't even envisioned.
Yep.
Most of what we're doing now is taking what exists in Web 2 and then converting it, adding elements of Web 3, proven categories, proven products. But I think there are certain things that haven't been built, will be built that we are not envisioning. And I think there's a sequence to that. So a lot of times I do think about, are we too early? Because I made a lot of these mistakes in 2017 and 2014 where, you know, decentralized compute networks and, prediction markets and some of these things like needed to have a robust DeFi ecosystem to kind of work. NFTs, why now? Why did we see why did last year was the year of NFTs? You could argue for a number of reasons, right? First and foremost, I think COVID.
Yep.
People are stuck inside. Artists can't, why artists now all of a sudden more interested in this as well because they can't,
They
they've
do
lost their
something.
primary revenue stream, right? They can't do live concerts for obvious reasons. And so NFTs are a good way to then, and it just takes simple things like that, not to be cliche, but like a butterfly effect like that, a small catalyst that triggers a whole sequence of things. But you need to have still on the back end a lot of infrastructure being built. And I think these things take time. Crypto can move really quickly, but at the same time, adoption and awareness is a snowballing effect, but it does take time to kind of get going. And I think we're very much in that phase, which is really exciting. I think gaming
100%.
is ready. And I think this year is where we go mainstream.
100%. And like on that game, like gaming starting to roll up, like what's your thoughts on some of the market caps in gaming? Like, because this is something that, as an outsider, you look at some of these valuations that games have,
Mm.
you look at things like Axie, Sandbox, Decentraland, all those sorts of things, Gala.
Mhm.
Like, does that seem like, because like from an investment point, does that seem like, again, I'm
Mhm.
trying not to do financial advice here, but do you think it seems realistic to be where they are for the products that they have?
Um, so I just dropped you a link. Um, I looked at this a while back around this exact same question. So there's two things. I'll start perhaps with the more like how big can this market be, and then are valuations warranted? And again, none of this is financial advice, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, here's why Web3 games are a massive category. Games in general are probably the fastest scaling, most profitable businesses ever, just in Web2. Like you look at Candy Crush, you look at
Mobile gaming's
um,
crazy.
mobile gaming is just crazy. People like to play games, and so point number one. Point number two is okay. How does Web3? How big can this category be? Well, look at what Axie's done. Not a very immersive game. I'll give them credit. It was super impressive, but I think
Yeah.
it's not a super immersive game. Nonetheless, they've created this category and proven to the market around this idea of play to earn, which is not perfect, right? Maybe you could argue not as sustainable, but nonetheless, it's worked. So Axia's game is now probably the top 12 amongst the top 10 or 12 game studios in the world. This includes Tencent, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, which just got acquired or is trying to get
Yeah.
acquired by 70 billion, Electronic Arts, Epic Games, Take-Two Interactive, Sega, Bandai, Ubisoft, Zynga, and then Sky Mavis, which is a company that developed Axie,
Yeah.
one game. It is 3 years old, has 60 employees. For a long time, it had like 10 or 12
Yeah.
in Vietnam. Now, all the others, are at least 20 years old, have thousands of employees. Now, let's look at revenue. Revenue, at least the last 12 months or last year, uh, is not too far. I mean, Sky Mavis is probably going to crank out between 1 and 1.5, or cranked out 1.5 billion in revenue
Yeah.
last year. Zynga 2.8, Ubisoft 2.2. And the number one is Tencent, 25 billion, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're
Nintendo,
crazy.
for instance, 15 billion, Microsoft, Activision, 8 billion, Electronic Arts, 5 billion. So the question is, okay, like that really conjures up your imagination. Say, how can a Web3 game, can Axie surpass that? It has one game, 60 employees, 3 years old. And
Yeah.
all the frictions, all the limitations that are the hurdles that you need to get past. to get set up in this game. Now think about that. And then you wonder, well, envision a world where you abstract away all the friction for users to come into the space. And you have more immersive games and increasing awareness, all the tailwinds that we know of crypto, increasing awareness about NFTs and desire to own property and own digital property, and people spending more time in the digital world. And the network effects that I think will exist if a very immersive game, you may be onboarded to Axie through Play to Earn, and then you might go to Illuvium, or vice versa, right?
Yep.
And so you combine all of that and you say, yeah, a Web3 game studio like Illuvium could be among, or if not, in not too long from now, the number one, the most important game studio in the world.
Yep.
Close to Tencent.
So
now,
yeah, you go. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, okay, fine. Like that's the how big can we get? The question is, a lot of these games are trading at, a lot of expectations of what it can be, or that we just talked about. And as an investor, you want to understand, well, fine, but is it priced in? And how much of this expectation and in what time frame is this going to happen? And the two things that I always look at is circulating and fully diluted supply. In traditional development and financing, right, of startups, there are multiple rounds of financing that happen on certain checkpoints of progress made by the company. The trick with crypto is that you need to embed and hard code certain properties of the network, like token supply, that give it some fully diluted valuation that may not come to fruition until 40 years from now, right? Bitcoin has 21 million tokens. Okay, it's a fixed supply. But then it's important to kind of, I always look at the fully diluted network value to understand, okay, what is the expectation, right? But also you have to look at the emission curve and the inflation curve of the tokens of, are all the tokens going to be in circulation year 2? Much different than if all the tokens are going to be in circulation year 40.
Yep.
And what percentage of the total token supply is going to be circulating in year 3, 5, 10? Yep. And so I look at that. Those are the things that I'm looking at. I do agree with you. Like there is a lot of hype. There's a lot of money chasing the next Axie, or YGG, or even Alluvium. But at the end of the day, no amount of financial engineering, no amount of hype, no amount of marketing will ever make up for a shitty product.
Yeah. So
yeah,
you're sort of like leading into the idea that the sort of valuations we're seeing make sense when it's a projection based on the quality that they feel their game will be compared to what Axie was able to produce based on its quality. So it's all speculation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But
I mean, it's all, and also relative valuation too, right? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah,
it was just one of those things that's just interesting because you see all these huge prices and you're like a lot of these things don't even have, player bases yet. And it's crazy. But yeah, it's just an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I came from a world of fundamental analysis and valuation. I mean, this is why DeFi protocols became interesting to me early on. Now, again, like, if you see a path for Axie to start making 1, 2, 3, 5 billion in revenue and puts it around epic games like Fortnite. Fortnite is probably the clear example here. Fortnite, I think, just raised at 70 billion or so. I think, give or take. Don't quote me on that.
I'll quote you on it. Don't worry about
it. You'll definitely quote me on this. Yeah, great. It's like whenever you say don't quote me on that, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll definitely quote you on that. I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna look at this right now.
Google it up.
Yeah, because it's so important. I mean, Fortnite, Fortnite was last valued at 28 billion. No, here we go. Yeah, 40-ish billion. I think they're like private markets are like valuing it closer to 70, which is where I saw it recently. But call it, okay, let's round numbers. Let's play with this idea of 50 billion. It's cranking out 5 billion in revenue. So that's a 10x on revenue, right? Axie, for instance, is producing, call it 1.5 billion in revenue. Okay. Well, it probably warrants like a $15 billion valuation. What's it trading on right now? Let's look at this. Fully diluted.
Fully diluted. Yeah.
AXS. And it's trading at 14.5 billion fully diluted valuation.
Yep. So you're lining them up.
It's not far off.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Fortnite, which in my estimation is probably the most direct analog comp here, which is
Yeah.
look what it's doing, right? It's created this expansive world, quasi open source. People can it's a kit and people can build.
Yeah.
You have concerts. There's a thriving ecosystem, right? And it's trading at call it 10 times revenue.
Yeah. And Axie is
Now,
like the catalyst proof of concept for these other
exactly.
ones to be able to
Yeah.
get their
Uh-huh.
baselines that they've been reaching.
Now, of course, pound for pound, Fortnite, is in a different league, right? So, is it justified to have that 15 forward, the 15 multiple? Probably not. But again, there's other components that I would argue it's faster growing. It's a new category. It's a way to get exposure to Web3. If you believe in Web3, then this is pretty interesting. It's a category leader, yada, as is Fortnite. And so, look, we can make arguments of why one Fortnite should have a command a premium. Maybe again, it's not Web3, it's Web2. So if you believe in Web3 and Web3 should have a premium, but it's also riskier, less improvement. So, anyways, you can go through all of this mental
Yeah.
models, but nonetheless, I mean, still, it's not far off. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Right? It's not wild.
Yeah.
When someone says, "Wait a minute, why is Axie worth 15 billion?" I'm like, "Wait a minute, well, because it's cranking out revenue. Like it's a game that's like 3 years old
Yeah.
and is producing 1 billion in revenue or so."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Makes sense.
by
Yeah.
the
I was
way,
really
in one
curious on
game,
that.
Epic Games, Fortnite's been around for 30 years and has 3,200 employees. Axie's been around for 3 and has 60 employees.
Yeah.
It's like fuck off.
It's fucking good.
You know,
Yeah.
now Illuvium is different, right? I mean, I think like a lot of it is predicated on it's in my there is a version of this world where it totally flies past. And the competition is really not Axie. The competition is Fortnite. I always tell Kieran and I have a pinned message in our chat. And it's the goal here is to crush Fortnite and Activision and all the other game studios out there.
Yeah. 100%. I definitely agree with that. That's like when you just look at the quality of the game, it's definitely the thing. Now that sort of
Well, let's one last thing, right?
yeah, go.
Whenever you place a multiple, you got to look at year-over-year growth. Okay, fine. Axie has exploded, in a year's time. The revenue growth is like 1,650%. Okay, it's starting from a low base, but still. All the other game studios that I just told you, even Fortnite, growing at 20% year-over-year revenue.
Yeah. Having said that, I do.
We ought to look at users and all this other stuff, but nonetheless, you know what I'm talking about. Like, Tencent was the only other web studio that is growing decent, like plus 100% is Tencent, but it's inorganic because they made a number of acquisitions.
Yeah.
But Sony, Nintendo is growing at 36% year over year. Activision Blizzard 25%. Fortnite 20%. Ubisoft 40%. Zynga 46%.
Having said that, I think it'll be interesting to watch Axie this year because if you just look at the cost of Axies, like I jumped in the middle of the year and it cost me $1,000 to get an Axie. Now it's about $30, so I think their revenue will definitely drop this year. But
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah,
yeah. Look, well, I think it would be interesting. The rate of growth will decelerate.
Yeah,
absolutely. The price of SOP is something that I'm looking at. Is how sustainable is this economy of play to earn? I think you need spenders to support a very healthy game economy. This is why, in order to have spenders,
good game.
You need to have an immersive game, right? And unclear to me if this simple game like Axie can attract meaningful spenders.
Yeah,
that's sort of things that I'm looking at, right? But still,
100%. And to me, because I come from a mobile gaming background, like mobile gaming is where I see a hell of a lot of spenders in that gotcha, like that addictive getting a random chance at something. And obviously Illuvium has that. But that leads me into the other question, the final question that I want to go, because I know we're a bit tight for time. But with Illuvium, we're obviously looking to do another raise for capital to streamline the mobile development. And even though mobile to me isn't the most important thing as opposed to just getting the PC client out, getting through the open beta and working it all out. But in the future, I see mobile as even just a great marketing ploy to reach those spenders where they are on mobile. But obviously we've hit, a bit of a downtrend in the market. As an investor, how do you think that sort of impacts the ability to raise those funds?
I'm not worried about it.
No.
At all.
Yeah. So
You look at the progress this team has made over the last year. There's a very clear. Sometimes you do wonder, why is the team raising money? And in this case, there's a very clear rationale to do that, right? Because to your some of the things that we touched on earlier is, once you have a vector and you see a path to dominating, you don't slow down.
yeah,
And I think smart investors, look at that,
yeah,
um, and fund that in any environment. Any environment. Okay, fine. Maybe, but still, um, there's a very clear rationale to building a mobile game, because, as you point out, that's how you win, right? That's like the jugular, right? Once you throw a really immersive mobile experience to get players playing, um, it's sort of like, you look at FIFA, you look at NBA, like 2K21, all these games. They have obviously the PlayStation version, the Xbox version, then they have mobile, and then there's a lot of, you know onboarding that happens on mobile, and then the folks that are playing, you just want to capture attention. Again, that's the name of the game.
yeah.
And no matter what you're doing in this world, attention is very scarce. It's the scarcest resource ever. And if someone is playing Illuvium on their desktop and they have 5 minutes of their time commuting to work, you want to capture that attention in
Yeah.
every single touch point. And so that's the rationale. And so for that reason, I'm not worried at all. There's a very clear rationale to use these funds to build a mobile experience.
100%.
The team has proven to like hire people. And so,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
just going to say, but from the aspect of investors out there giving money out when effectively
Not
now
worried
money's a
about
bit tighter, you think that
No,
in
not worried
in
about it.
in the free money sense of every project just getting money thrown at them, that has an impact. But because Illuvium is so far developed and on the right path, investors want to be part of that.
Yeah, you want to always back the category leader. There's a
Yeah.
very probabilistically high probability that Illuvium will be the category leader. And so, look, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
I'm an investor. I always look at that. And look, again, none of this is advice, but yeah, this is, in my mind, something that I'm looking at, right? Because you're right. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of crap out there. It's hard to find really good teams that have been able to hire, that have just actually delivered. Now, okay, fine. Illuvium hasn't launched, but you look at everything that they produced so far. There's strong indications, in my estimation, that it is a team that I continue to spend. Again, I'm not making any. People can do whatever they want, right? But as an investor, which is what I do, those are the signals and that I look at. But I don't know. I'm not worried about it. I think, first of all, not to go into this like rabbit hole of and what kind of market environment are we in, but you look at private funding rounds of crypto, they're not slowing down.
Yeah. It's
If
good.
anything, a lot of traditional funds like Sequoia, Tigers of the world are finally realizing, oh shit, now the category is big enough for me to deploy.
Yep.
We're in a record low interest rate environment with people doing dumb shit to capture yield. Where are you going to capture that? Government bonds, because rates went up 8 times this year from negative to 0.1. Come on. At the end of the day, people realize the only way to beat inflation, in my mind, the only way that actually gets humanity out of any trouble is innovation. And there are two pockets of this world that I think you want to be always investing in, which is biotech, which is the ability to improve yields and to improve the human condition in a very meaningful way and extend life or improve the quality of life while we're living it. And the second one is technology, because it allows us to do really powerful stuff. And within technology, which is vast, think about how much consumer surplus and benefit the internet has created over the last 20 years. Unbelievable.
100%.
Like the S&P 500, I was just looking at today, the S&P 500, the composition of that, which is the index in the US, is totally transformed from industrials and old businesses you don't even think of today to internet, increasingly.
And
Now, my view is, you know what I mean? Like, I think smarter investors, from my vantage point, people that have been very reluctant to invest behind crypto because, our investors, don't believe in crypto. I think this is a scam. This is a fad. This is a bubble. To now, holy shit. Yeah. This is where the smartest people from the companies that we're investors in, Web2, are leaving to go to Web3. And so it took a lot of things for them to wake up to this. I'm glad that they're finally doing that. I don't hold it against them. I think, great. These are smart people. They should come into the space. And so in that process, they eventually stumble upon category leaders or protocols, networks, projects that have elements, early indication signals of becoming category leaders. And so I would argue that more capital is coming into the space than ever before.
Yeah. And can I just say, like, if you guys like that sort of I was just thoroughly enjoying I enjoy the broader macro type general conversation. And
Mm.
if you guys do enjoy that sort of stuff, definitely go and listen to the podcast, because I just listen to you when I'm out walking, or one ear in when I'm just doing shit around the house cooking. And I just, me personally, I love listening to that broad macro, like holistic type idea stuff. So I just thoroughly enjoyed that bit right there. And
Yeah, I don't mean to put, or people are just put them to sleep. I always tell maybe my podcast is like free melatonin for everyone to just fall asleep.
no, it's
Because macro can be really boring. What's really exciting is Web3, and
yeah,
you go to Discord channel of Illuvium or Synthetics even, or some of these. It's fascinating stuff. It's the
oh
smartest people there. It's the best ideas, and also it's a community. It's an industry that is constantly challenging stuff because it's so early. And look, I don't think anyone in this space should be saying or is prepared to say we figured it out. And I think that to me always screams we're early, but it's super exciting because these are hard problems. Smart people always want to work on hard problems, and there's no shortage of that. And that's the beauty of it. Like, we iterate fast, we move fast. It's open source. Anyone can come in here from wherever you are in the world, no matter what you look like, no matter what what your background, pedigree, experience is. If you have good ideas, you get discovered.
yeah,
And that's just you look at a lot of this is why, like, people should just go to these discords, and which is where I think the expression, where the conversation's happening, and look at that and say, how could you not be excited about this? Like, versus a walled approach of, you have a manager and the manager reviews your shit, and then he might have an ego and he might
yeah,
not like want to like make like share the. It's just a whole, you collapse all of that,
yeah,
and information moves out to these nodes where people with the most experience, closest to where the information is being produced, are empowered. And that's the beauty of all this stuff. That's why you decentralize, because information moves faster, and you combine that with capital.
yeah.
This idea that you can move capital the same way you move information, the internet allowed, crypto's allowed, Web3. And you combine all that and you start producing really killer applications. And gaming is going to be probably the biggest category.
Yeah. And like the thing I always go to is, like, I used to love Formula One. I don't watch as much now, but I used to always say,
Mhm.
like 5-10 years ago, if you have a problem in the world, give it to Formula One as a regulation,
Mhm.
because they get the best minds from everywhere
Mhm. Mhm.
and have all the funding. And I feel like now that is just crypto. If you
Right.
have a problem to solve in the world, put it to a protocol, and you will get the
Mhm.
best minds and you will get the funding, and it's how you solve problems now, because those are
Absolutely.
the two things you need to solve anything. But I won't keep you any longer, dude, because we have hit that hour, around
Yeah.
that
No,
hour
absolutely.
limit. But I really do appreciate you coming on, dude. The
Absolutely. Yeah.
insight, the work you do for Alluvium, because I know I talked to a bunch of the other people in the community behind the scenes,
Thank you.
and they really speak highly of the work you do for
Thank
the
you.
community as a whole. So I really appreciate you coming on. And definitely, guys, check out that podcast. Like I said, I'll leave it linked in the description.
Yeah, no, Kevin, it's great to be here, and happy to come back anytime. People, I'm bored to death, but really appreciate the time, and yeah, I'll see you in the Illuvium Discord.
100%.
So thank you for hosting. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, dude. Catch, guys.
Take care.